broke this year, he dragged someone to Times Square with balloons to celebrate.
75,000 on YouTube.
75,000 on YouTube. Oh, that was me and you.
Yeah, that was us. Yeah.
But he's incredible. And then, so what this session's going to focus today is on podcasting for health. So before I ever met Cody, he had experience podcasting, and then one of the things that we got to work on with our neuroscience team was the Unseen and Unheard podcast, which was all to raise awareness about schizophrenia, raise awareness, and about treatment options for there. So you can all follow that on wherever you listen to your podcast. So Cody, I'm sure we'll talk about that. And life beyond podcasting, so whether you're just getting into this for the first time or have experience doing it, I'm sure you'll walk away with some amazing info today. Okay. Cody, woo!
All right, can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, I figured I had a loud enough voice that I didn't need a microphone, so we were gonna just roll with it. Thank you so much to Marissa and the J&J team for having me. If you guys have been here previous years, I usually talk more about social media in the form of TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. But this year, because of the Unseen and Unheard podcast and the work I did with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the logistics of podcasting and why it's a really good platform now to have. I know we only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to try to squeeze in as much information as I can for you. We are also live on YouTube and Instagram, because even if I'm going to be talking about podcasting, I can't help but to do the social media too. So we're going to get right into it. For anyone who's not really experienced with podcasting, just getting into it, this is the agenda for today. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about myself. I'm going to talk about storytelling. I'm going to talk about why podcasting is important right now, the impact that podcasting can have, how to get started, what kind of stuff you'll need, equipment, audio, stuff like that, and then how to grow your podcast. For anyone who isn't here for their first year, most of you know me. I know most of the faces in the room. My name's Cody. I am a schizophrenia advocate. I'm a mental health advocate. I am recently an author, not officially. My book comes out in January, so soon I will be an author. This last year, I was the host of the Unseen and Unheard podcast, like Marissa had mentioned. And I have, she said 1.5, but collectively I actually have closer to 1.8 million followers across platforms. Had to correct her, of course. And so I got started on TikTok. And shortly after being on TikTok, I decided to look into podcasting, because even when I was looking into podcasting, and this was 5 years ago, it was finally becoming a really big thing. People are listening to podcasts on their commutes, while they're working, and so now more than ever, as popular as short format content is and TikTok is, now more than ever, people are listening to podcasts. For the first time ever, we're seeing people with huge careers just podcasting. And so this is a very real time for something like this to be successful. And so, did they give me a laser pointer? They always regret doing that. Oh, they did. Okay, so the very first project I did was called Criminally Mental. It was with me and another content creator named Zach Galloway. He is a mental health, prison reform, and addiction recovery content creator. So both of us had very similar backgrounds. We both struggled with addiction. We both struggled with being incarcerated, and we were both mental health advocates. So when I met him on social media, I was like, this is the perfect person for me to have conversations about addiction, mental health, prison reform, all of these topics. And we had very candid conversations. If you decide to go back and listen to it, I will say it's a little unhinged, because we did it live, we did not edit it, and so it was very real conversations, and that was the goal. We only did this podcast for about a year. Within 6 months, we had over 1 million downloads. And I'm gonna go into how we kind of reached that success and what that looked like. The other podcast you'll see on the far side is called the NeuroBlend podcast. This is a recent project I'm doing with my wife. As I just said, I am a schizophrenia advocate. My wife is on the autism spectrum and she has ADHD. And so we were talking about all things neurodivergent over cups of coffee. That's kind of the idea. And so this is a new project. We're just starting. We took a little break so that I could finish my book, and we're just getting back into it. And then, of course, Oh my goodness. I just wanted to make sure everyone else heard that too. And so the last one up here is, of course, the Unseen and Unheard podcast. This was the one that I'm going to talk about the most because it's been my most recent project. I got to interview, all of the other people I interviewed on this were other schizophrenia patients. So we got to interview Carlos Ferrari, who some of you know. We interviewed some other people who were pursuing their goals while living with schizophrenia. And the very last episode of the podcast, we interviewed my mom, who also lives with schizoaffective disorder. We were able to talk to her about her diagnosis, but also what it was like having to watch her son grow up with the same diagnosis. And so you're going to hear all weekend from all the different people who are here helping you learn more about advocacy and learn more about social media, is that the main key to this is storytelling. The reason we're successful as advocates and as health content creators is because we have the ability to share stories. Most of us are not getting on screen and dancing. I promise you I will never make you watch me dance on a TikTok video. But the reason we are able to reach people and connect with people is because we have stories to tell. We want to try to help people better understand certain illnesses, certain diseases, and we do that by telling our lived experiences of what we've been through. And there's a lot that comes with that. Not only is it helping communities, but I think in a way it helps all of us. We get to go through everything we've been through, help people feel less alone in their own journeys. And when you start building a platform, you'll find that you really build a community. I have so much support from the people who follow me on social media, who listen to my podcasts. I said that I've been on social media for almost 5 years. I still have people reach out asking if we're ever going to revamp the Criminally Mental podcast. And this is 3-4 years that we haven't been doing this. And so you build long-term fans. You build people who want to follow your story, who want to learn more about your field. Whether you're a cancer advocate, whether you're someone here talking about HIV or diabetes or any of the things that we're here advocating for, people can identify with your stories. And you get to kind of become a voice for the voiceless. Not everyone in our communities is going to want to get in front of a room of people or open up their phone and be very vulnerable and share what they're going through. And so we get to be the bridge between our communities and information. We also get to use the power of our advocacy to reach providers, caregivers, patients, all of the people that are affected by what we go through and how we experience our different illnesses. And this is really what we're here to talk about, is podcasting specifically, because right now, podcasting is huge. People are listening, people want to find new podcasts. I run out of a podcast to listen to about every week. And then I need to ask my friends and family, what are they listening to? Because there is so much content out there, and you need to make sure that people can find you. It's estimated just Americans, there are over 100 million Americans listening to podcasts each week. So you got to find out how you can be one of those people that they're listening to on a weekly basis. Other social media can be limiting for complex topics like health conditions, because we have limited time, right? If you guys were in Katie and Hannah's session just before this one, you heard them say that you have to get people's attention, and if you're on social media, you have limited time to get a message across. If you're on TikTok, people don't want to sit there for 3 minutes and listen to a video. When people log on to a podcast platform, they are giving you a lot of extra time that you don't get on social media. The same could be said for YouTube, but even that, people are watching YouTube videos, sometimes they'll go to do something else. Podcasts, they're putting you in, they're listening to you while they travel, while they do work, and so this is a really good opportunity for you to expand on topics that you don't normally get to expand on. And so this will also help you connect with your communities because the more information you can give them, the more valuable of a resource you are. I listen to a lot of different podcasts, not just mental health podcasts, but like many people in here, I'm sure people have listened to true crime podcasts. They hook me. I wish they didn't, but they do. And it's really about making sure that you can get information to your audience, but be captivating and make sure that you can keep them for 30 minutes or an hour, because that is a lot of time people are investing in you and this topic. Podcast viewership grew 26% in 2022 and 31% in 2023, and right now the data for 2024 is still growing. So it's looking like this year is going to be bigger than the last 2 years even. So this is the best time to really get into sharing your story in the form of a podcast because more people are listening than ever. And when you are doing this, it's important to look at the impacts that this is going to have on you, on your community, and on the topic that you're trying to bring awareness to. When you start doing a podcast, you're going to realize that you're reaching a lot of people with similar lived experience. The same as when you're doing social media, the same as when you're on Instagram, TikTok. The reason that we are able to be successful as health content creators is because the people seek us out. They look for other people who have been through what they've been through so that they feel less alone, so that they have someone they can identify with, and they can see like, hey, someone came through this on the other side. It gives them hope, it gives them purpose, and it gives them something that they can really push for. And so when you're doing this, you're changing narratives. You're really giving people a different idea of what your illness looks like. I'm a schizophrenia advocate. I get told a lot on social media that I am too functional to be able to be a person living with schizophrenia because I'm medicated. Yeah, that's it's a good thing, I guess. But honestly, it's like people see me and it's hard for them to believe that I'm someone living with schizophrenia, and I think that makes it even better for me to be up here sharing my story because I'm not what people think of when they think of schizophrenia. So by me being able to reach people through podcasting and social media, they get to see a different image of what they usually see. When I was first diagnosed, I had never seen someone living a full functional life with schizophrenia, and I'm going to call him out because he's in the room. But I always say this when I talk about podcasting. Gabe Howard and Michelle Hammer, they created the BSP podcast, which is Bipolar, Schizophrenic, and a Podcast. And I found that when I was very first in my diagnosis, when I felt very alone. And it's what inspired me and made me realize that there were people living full functional lives with mental illness, and I had never known that. I had never seen it. The media, movies, TV shows, they don't show you those things. They only show you people who are struggling with mental illness, people who are doing horrific things because they didn't get the help they needed. And so these podcasts do reach people and they do inspire people. And even in my amount of time doing this, I've seen people come to me and say, hey, I found your story on a podcast or on social media and inspired me to share my story. So we are inspiring the next advocates who are coming up in Gen Z, and there's a lot of them because they are the generation who's finally open to talking about mental health, to talking about different disorders. And so by sharing your story, you're changing the narratives, you're reaching new people, and you're really showing what the norms look like, because we have this idea of what different illnesses look like, what people who struggle with different illnesses look like, and until you've been there, until you've lived it, or you've met someone who's been there, you don't really know what someone is going through and what they had to do to get to the point that they're at. Podcasting has also been really amazing recently in influencing change. We can connect with politicians, with policymakers, with the people who are writing the laws about what we do, about all of the things we experience, about medication, insurance. And so this gives us a platform to reach people, to initiate different policies, and to influence change. And that's, from a patient perspective, is incredible. We have the ability to finally be a beacon for our communities and not only be a voice, but to be a person who's impacting how we're treated as people with our various illnesses and different backgrounds. I also found that one of the huge impacts for me was that I started learning a lot from the people that were in my sessions, on my podcasts. I put two different examples up here. These are both from the Unseen and Unheard podcast. The first one is Carlos. So some of you in this room know Carlos Labrari. He is a schizophrenia advocate who is also a board certified psychiatric practitioner, nurse practitioner. And he recently went back to get his law degree, and he is a very good example of how, like, a schizophrenia diagnosis did not define his future. It may have changed the outcome of what he thought he would do, but it definitely didn't limit him in getting his education and pursuing new goals and making changes in the lives of people with a similar illness. Nathan and Richard were both individuals who I got to speak to that were pursuing their different goals. Nathan is a content creator who does, I always say book talk, you know, the people who like review books on social media, but he's so passionate about it, and he taught me a lot because it's a lot of information that I was not aware of, and it's a lot of things that he's able to really get out on the forefront, both politically and advocacy, and a lot of information that people wanted to know. Richard is someone who is a music producer and a musician, and he got to pursue his goal because of the stability that he had, learning about his illness and finding the right treatments and medication. So I got to learn a lot from them, but it was really about how to get started, right? Because if you're interested in a topic, everyone has an idea. They're like, I could talk about this. I listen to crappy podcasts all the time. I could make a way better podcast. And you can, I guarantee it, because you guys have stories to tell. You guys have information to get to communities, and the best way to do that is to get started. And so I just have a few tips for if you're wanting to get started. I can give you a few tips, and then we'll get into some of the equipment you'll need and all of that. But I think the first and most important thing is to find a niche. It's very hard to have a podcast about everything. Some people can do it. Those people have been doing the podcast space for a long time. They kind of already have that done. When we're talking about niches, we all kind of have our own thing. So the nice thing about us being health content creators, us having a purpose, us doing advocacy, is that we have topics that we can talk about. And you can keep it a little more broad. So like when I started the Criminally Mental podcast, we left it open to mental health, addiction, and criminal justice, because that allowed us to bring on a lot of different guests. It allowed us to get a lot of different perspectives. And it's really easy when you know what your niche is to find a list of people who might be good to bring on to have conversations with. When we did the Unseen and Unheard podcast, we knew that we only wanted to interview patients living with schizophrenia and caregivers. That was our target market. We wanted to make sure that that's who our audience was hearing from. There's enough really good resources out there from doctors and psychiatrists. We wanted something from patients for patients. And so J&J, this was a podcast that I joined onto, but I was already sold on the premise of we are doing this to reach patients with patient stories. And so when I started, we formed a list of social media content creators who had schizophrenia, and it's very easy to find these people, because now that we have social media, you can find anyone talking about topics like mental health or cancer or whatever it is you advocate for. Simply go to whatever your favorite platform is, type in the topic, you will find an abundance of creators. And start making a list, reaching out to these people, because most of them are more than willing to come on podcasts. It's good exposure for them. They get to reach more people. They get to reach into your audience. It's a win-win for everyone involved. The next thing you have to do is decide on a format. So when it comes to podcasting, there are options now. I always pick on Gabe. I'm doing it again. I'm sorry, Gabe. I always pick on Gabe for being, let's say, aged. But sorry. Gabe's been doing podcasting for a long time, and one of the things that he will definitely agree with me on, and we've talked about, is podcasting has changed over the years. There are a lot of new ways to do it. Next week, I'll be sitting in on a session with YouTube about them allowing more podcasting platforms and making it an easier platform for podcasting. I've also done live podcasts, like I said with the Criminally Mental podcast. That was a very different platform than what you see a lot of people doing, because we were live every single week. We did our normal topic, and then we did a Q&A. So we would take live questions, and that's a very different stance, because you never know what's going to come up. You never know what people are going to say. And so it was very interesting, but it prompted us to have a lot of very open conversations, and a lot of conversations that we might have hesitated on had we not had that type of platform. It's really important that you, look into equipment and software, and I'm going to go more into that on the next slides. but there's a lot of different ways that you can edit your podcast. There's a lot of different ways you can get your podcast to multiple platforms. And so it's really important to kind of look into that as you're getting started. And there's a lot of content creators who offer this information up for free. You can go onto YouTube. People have made videos about this, how to get started, what software they use, and what equipment they use. So there's plenty of information out there if you're looking to get started. And you need to stay up to date with research. If you're having a podcast, one of the things people love to hear is current events. You can always tie in whatever it is you're going through, whatever it is you're advocating for, to current events. There's always something in the news, and a lot of you are people who are setting trends in your space. The news might be about you. When you're doing these different things, when you're being interviewed by local news, when you're setting out to make these changes, when you're advocating policy, some of these things you're going to be able to talk about on your platform, but you can also tie in whatever else is going on in the news that affects your community. And that's what people want to hear, because we can get a lot of information now from social media, and we can help our communities better understand how policy changes are affecting them, what kind of things to look out for with new changes in insurance. There's all sorts of different ways we can educate our community and the people listening to our content. But we have to stay up to date on what's changing. You can utilize awareness days. Like I always try to do a lot more content during Mental Health Month and Schizophrenia Awareness Week. And so there's a lot of things you guys can do during days like this to really amplify your message. And you can really start learning as you grow. One of the things I did, when I did my first podcast, we jumped right in. There is some things I regret about that, obviously. You know, there's a lot that I didn't know, there's a lot I had to learn on the go. But when you get started, you see what you need, what your audience wants from you, and you can really start to grow with your audience. And that's a really beautiful thing to be able to do. And obviously, I say this every time I come to talk to you guys about social media, podcasting, whatever. Start putting out content ASAP, because the best way to reach people is to have content out there. Everyone wants to know, what do you need, right? What do you need to get started? I'm going to go over some of my favorite equipment, but as Katie and Hannah said earlier today, you can get started with a phone. You can get started with a webcam on your computer. If it means getting started right away, use what you have. You can always invest in equipment later. That being said, as your podcast grows, depending on how you want to platform it, you might want different things. A lot of people are doing video podcasts now, or at least recording so that they can get clips for social media. So that might be something you want to look into further down the road. But when you're getting started, use what you have, because the most important thing is to get content out there. You can always work on adding additional things later. So when it comes to equipment, it can be an ongoing investment. When you get started, you only really need a phone, a laptop, something with a webcam, just to be able to record yourself, just to be able to get an audio. As you keep going, make sure that you invest in a microphone. Because even if you don't do video, microphone's going to be your big thing. I use Shure SMB, and I'll talk about that on another slide. But that is my go-to. There's also the Blue microphone that is like a little less expensive, really good quality. Elgato has a lot of different products that are very dependable. And so this is another really good time to look at what other content creators are doing. If you listen to podcasts, what are they using? Because if you're listening to them, you must like the quality of their content, you must like the quality of their audio. Kind of look at what they're using too. Microphones, there's also Logitech, which it's not my go-to, but when you're getting started, there's definitely cheaper options with Logitech. And then it's also important to look at your computer or laptop. If you're doing a live streaming, Wi-Fi, computer and laptop becomes a much bigger deal. If you're doing a live podcast, you need to focus on making sure you have dependable equipment for your computer, for whatever Wi-Fi you're using, usually a direct connection. I made the mistake of when we first started doing our live podcast, I never told anyone to prep and be plugged into Wi-Fi, so we would bring on guests. And if you go back and watch it, we had a lot of glitchy interviews, we had a lot of people fall off. And so when you're bringing on guests, let them know what equipment they need too, because they need to make sure they have fast Wi-Fi. Even if you're not doing a live stream, that is going to depend largely on how the audio comes through on your end. So make sure they have a good connection, make sure they have good Wi-Fi, make sure they have a good microphone, or are at least using headphones to muffle out some of that noise. When it comes to cameras, this is going to depend largely on if you want B-roll, if you want video, if you're trying to promote it on social media, which you guys know, I'm always going to tell you to promote stuff on social media. If you're wanting to do that, you might want to record it, or you might at least want to get clips of you that you can post from the podcast. The best way to do this is use all of the tips you're going to get about social media and apply it to your podcast. A lot of the clips I share from podcasts are one-liners. I'm not sharing 3 minutes worth of podcasting. I'm not even sharing a minute worth of podcasting. I'm sharing a few sentences so that people can hear a topic, get excited about it, and have a lot of questions about, oh, this is really interesting, I want to learn more. It's a little different than social media because you have to get them to go to your podcast. You have to get them to leave the platform they're on and really deep dive into what you were talking about. So it has to be compelling, it has to be interesting, and you have to catch them right away. And the best way to do that is to record the podcast, to have video of it, take clips of you and your guests, and be able to use that to market yourself on social media. Software is going to be a little different depending on what route you depend to go, because there are ways that you can record the podcast live, there are ways that you can record it and edit it right in certain apps or certain websites. There's also different ways to share it. So I'm going to start with how to online stream. So that was how I got started, and there's a lot of different ways to do this now. OBS is going to be for people that use, like anyone in here that does like Twitch or anything like that. It's really a platform meant to be for online streaming. So if you do Twitch, YouTube, stuff like that, it's a very complicated way to do it, but you have way more flexibility on changing things, moving positions of camera, really making it your own and personalizing it. It takes a lot longer to learn, but if you're willing to invest the time, you can really do a lot of different things with OBS. The one that I used was StreamYard. The reason I still use it today when I'm doing live streams on certain platforms is because I can go live on StreamYard and be live on 5 different platforms. I can be on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I can be doing all of these platforms at once and taking questions from most of them. So if I go live on StreamYard and someone asks a question on Twitch or on YouTube, I can actually display that question on the screen. So if you're doing a live podcast, StreamYard is amazing. It's not going to be the best for if you're just recording a podcast and editing it. A lot of people have been using Riverside. Is that? Yeah. Riverside. Yeah. And so that's a very good one if you're looking to do interviews and you're looking to keep that content, have different camera views. You'll get different downloads with the audios and the camera views. So if you're purely looking to edit a podcast, that's a very good platform. It's one of the most popular right now. Right now. There's also a lot of editing software out there right now. So there's Spotify for streamers. It used to be called Anchor. That's what I used to use. You can share your podcast right to that platform and it'll disperse it to Apple Podcasts, Spotify. That way you're not having to upload it to every single platform because we have limited time as content creators. We can't sit down and edit something and post it to 10 different platforms. And then that allows you to also edit on the platform itself. So Anchor and Spotify for podcasters, it really allows you to go in there, edit it without having to put it into external software. Now, you'll get better results if you use external software. The one that I tend to use is Wondershare Filmora. That's going to be really better if you're using a video aspect as well. There are better ones if you're doing just audio. That's my go-to because I also tend to do video so that I can promote it on social media. And if you're doing shorts editing, you can either do that in-app or on Splice. And what I mean by in-app is whatever platform you're putting it on, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all of these platforms are finally at a place where we can edit most of what we need right in the platform. I am trying to do more on Splice and Wondershare Filmora because it gives me a little more ability to add things and make it more personal. Everyone wants to know how do I make podcast something that I can do full time, right? We all want to be able to do advocacy full time. We all want to be able to. Everyone pulled out their phones. They're like, how do I do this? And so what you need to know is how can you actually make money from podcasting? What are some of the forms of income that you're going to have opportunities with? Right away, in my very first podcast I did, because we had such big viewership in such a short amount of time, we were getting a lot of different offers from sponsors. And keep in mind, that's going to happen once you start growing, and you really should pick one that is relevant to your topic and what you're doing. I don't know if you've ever been listening to a podcast, and it's like a mental health podcast, very serious, and they're like, and now, from Dunkin' Donuts. And I'm like, okay, well, don't get me wrong, I love coffee and donuts, but what does that have to do with the podcast I'm currently listening to? And so try to keep it genuine to what your brand is, what you're promoting, and try to make sure that whoever you support believes in what you believe. One of my earlier sponsorships I had, and once again, this is going to sound out of the realm of what I do. It was from a company called Dope. It's a cookie dough. But the reason I did it was the founder is a recovering alcoholic and addict, and all of or half of the proceeds from the company went to different foundations to help with recovering alcoholics and people struggling with addiction. So in a very turnaround way, it actually was very relevant to what I was doing, and I made sure to talk about that because I knew my audience would be passionate about it. And there's a lot of different ways that investors are going to reach out to you and ask you to promote. Some people will offer you income by views, which I put up RPM. That's going to be how they offer you views based on per 1,000 views. So some companies will reach out and say, we're willing to give you so much money per 1,000 views. I really try to stick to set rates, but that being said, when you're just starting out, if a company offers you a good rate per your listeners, it's a good way to build trust with the company. They might not give you a lot early on, but if your platform grows and they're getting a lot of clicks and they're getting a lot of interest, they might stick with you as that grows, and you might make more and more money as you get those views. You can also look at income from views if you stream directly to a platform. So where I was doing live streaming, I originally started live streaming on YouTube and Twitch. Both of those, I can make direct money from views or memberships. So people were becoming members on my Twitch so that they could come back every week, they could have exclusive ability to comment and chat, and then I would make money from monthly views on that. YouTube is very good if you're getting a lot of views. If people want to watch you and you're doing all the videography and you're wanting people to be able to see you and really connect with you, YouTube I think is a very good platform for that. I just had a conversation yesterday though with Katie, and I will say sponsorship on there can be a little difficult. It can be a little, it's in the works. Hopefully it improves, but there is different ways you can look at getting revenue from viewing, from membership, and making sure that you're really keeping yourself open to brand deals and sponsorships. And like I said, when it comes to the sponsorships, collaboration offers, be patient because you will get more than one. They do come in, it just takes a while. Once you start getting those views and start seeing an impact with clicks and everything like that, you will get those offers. You just have to wait until you start seeing a lot of that come in, and then making sure that you're staying relevant to your brand is going to make sure that any other sponsorships that reach out to you in the future are staying in line with that as well. So the next thing people always want to know is, how do I promote the podcast? There's a lot of different ways to do this. I was really lucky in working with Unseen and Unheard that they made a lot of these visuals for me. So this allowed me to really share with people what each episode was going to look like. So when I shared a scene with me and my mom, I showed her very emotional. I showed her talking about what it was like having to watch her own son go through the diagnosis that she was terrified living with. And that was really impactful, and it reached a lot of people. There's also ways to do it that are less direct. We had a lot of success with the Criminally Mental podcast, sharing clips that had nothing to do with the things we were talking about. Once again, one-liners, funny things that just happen to pop up. You can reach a lot of people just by your personality. Because like I said, you're not just promoting an idea or a topic. People are coming back week after week for you. For what you're sharing, for the information you're giving, because you built a community. And all it takes is a little clip of you being yourself, you sharing authentically, and people will come back. People will click out of the app they're in, go into podcasts, and find you because they're interested, they're intrigued, and they want to learn more about your perspective. when you build these communities, when you're marketing yourself, when you're marketing your podcast, you're really trying to show people that you know a lot about this topic. Whether it's lived experience, whether you're someone who is more on the clinical side, you have information that is relevant to people in your community. And you just have to show them that. And so social media has given us a really great platform to start advocating, but also to reach people that we've never reached before. And so if you promote it on social media, the best course of action is to do all of the same things you would do with your regular videos. Make them captivating, get people's attention, make sure that you're using it as a way to filter people over to the different platforms. So this is actually a picture of me at a recent event where I was talking to people about the Unseen and Unheard podcast. So I was able to go to the American Psychiatry Association with Johnson & Johnson, in which we were showing this podcast. The only downside was they had the podcast playing behind me, and I don't like hearing my own voice. I don't know if anyone else is like we're all content creators and podcasters, and I don't know a single person in this room who likes hearing their own voice, right?
I do.
Do you? Oh, you're so lucky. Oh man, I can't stand listening to my own voice. I won't even go back and watch these live streams for that reason. But it's really important to promote it and to make sure that you're using all of the social media you have, all of the reach you have, to be able to get people to these podcasts. Because, like I said, that's where you're going to make the most difference. I can only share so much with someone in a TikTok, right? I can only share so much with someone in 15 seconds or a minute. Podcasting was the first platform that let me get really into these topics and the intricacies of medication, treatment, what I went through in my recovery, and what I go through as a person still living with schizophrenia. It was the only way that I could reach people in the way that I actually needed to make a difference. It was the only way I could inspire people to join me in making change. It was the only way that I could get people really involved and intrigued in my mission and what I was doing. And so there's a lot of different ways now that you can grow your podcast. If you're wanting to do it, we have a lot of people doing live podcasts once they get going. They go to an event like HealtheVoices, or they go to another conference and they do a live podcast. People love that. They love the interaction. It helps people learn about you. It also helps you engage with your audience. You can do a lot with events and speaking. I try to always promote the different projects I'm working on. So if you're also a speaker, do not be afraid to selflessly plug yourself. They want you here. They want to hear your voice. Plug all of your projects because they're important. They're a part of your advocacy and they're a part of what you do. Engaging with your audience is huge. And as any other content creator will tell you, it can be draining. It's a lot. But taking time to like comments, to engage with people's opinions, or we used to do live Q&As because that allowed people to ask questions directly to us, and it also helped us plan for our next topics. What questions are we getting the most from our audience? What do people want to know about our lived experience? That sets up a whole nother area of you being able to answer questions, you being able to engage with your audience. And then it leads you to all of these other opportunities as well. It's also really important when you're growing to stay true to your mission and your audience. It can be very easy for people to get into podcasting and forget why they're doing it. And I've heard podcasts like that, and it's very hard to stay involved with a podcast that you no longer believe or support the mission on. And so make sure that you're staying true to yourself, to your podcast, and your mission. And it's always going to come back to me saying this: post the content, get started, because you're not going to get anywhere if you don't take the leap, jump in, get started. There's so many resources, there's so many people in this very room who you can ask questions about for podcasting, for social media, for how to promote a podcast. I'm here the rest of the weekend, so I know we only have 30 minutes, and I wanted to save, do we have a couple minutes for Q&A?
Yeah.
I did it. I wanted to save a couple minutes in case anyone had any questions, but you guys can always reach out to me here. If you're on social, be sure to reach out to me on there. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys coming, and I'd love to have the last few minutes for questions.
We have till like 11:10. I don't know what time it is now.
Oh man, I'm so ahead of it. Oh, that's right, we had a little
Pushed out a
delay.
little. Don't tell
Okay,
me.
good, yeah. Awesome. And then, are we turning off lives
Yeah,
for questions?
yeah, turn
Okay.
it off now.
Sorry guys, you gotta go. Oh, That was bright. All right, and I'm gonna get these turned off quick.